Hi everyone, welcome to another video. This is Lotus with Art of Sacred Embodiment. So I wanted to talk today about one of my favorite topics, of course, embodiment, but I also wanted to talk about it in conjunction with my work, Yoga of the Divine Feminine, which is a path of embodiment, and it is a Shakti-Kundalini path. It is a Shakti-Put tradition, although now, as we are in this time of ascension, many people are going through a gentler Kundalini awakening, because really these are two of the same coin, right? Different perspectives, different maybe philosophies or teachings, but the experiential piece of this is very much the same. So my path originally came from the Shakti-Put, Shakti-Kundalini tradition, very different than the Kundalini tradition as seen with Yogi Bhajan, because we're talking about a path of the Divine Feminine. And as we work with the Divine Feminine, we're working with those qualities of the feminine, but also qualities that begin to unite the masculine and feminine, that bring a deeper unification, and it is a highly experiential path because it is a path of surrender. So what do all these words mean, right? So Shakti is the divine or sacred energy that resides in all human beings, and from the yogic teachings, it is the force, it is the energy that brings us to enlightenment, to nirvana, to any state, right, where we are in that full awakened remembrance of who we are, right? Not the small self, the big self. So one of the difference between perhaps Yogi Bhajan's tradition, which I will say I've never taken any classes, so I don't know this firsthand, but from what I've witnessed and seen, understood, had conversations about, it's very powerful, as it would be, but there is the use of mantra postures, chanting, breath work, meditation, all of those powerful points of access, right, that ultimately are to awaken the Kundalini, to awaken the Shakti force, that energy that will start to move through us. And I believe through that tradition, we're working at working with it and guiding it, right? So the path of surrender, or the path of the feminine, is very different in that there is no, there aren't necessarily techniques, and there is not a structure, because its purpose is of complete surrender to the divine force within us, the divine wisdom within us, which is in essence our own divinity, our own wisdom, our own highest self, our own connection to divine source. So it's often called the fast track. It's often called the pathless path. It's called, the path of surrender. And I also compare it as well to the mystery traditions, because within the mystery traditions, you are really going into the unknown. And in that unknown, you will be guided, you will be shown from an innate knowing within each of us. So this is a very quickening path of embodiment, because we are rapidly not only surrendering to the breakdown or rather, the breakdown, the breakthrough of ego. It does not mean that we are I'm not one of the people who think that we need to get rid of the ego. We're simply evolving the ego as we evolve. So it's a very quickened way of moving through that process and separating from our personality identification and from all identifications that we hold as our truth and that keep us separate and inhibited from expanding into those higher knowings of our true self, our true essence. So I have a book that has been recently published, and it's called, it's so funny, my brain just went, here, I'll show it to you, Awakening from the Dream. I forgot I had one right here. Awakening from the Dream, a Kundalini memoir by myself, Lotus Lindley. And that book goes into tremendous detail of the experiential piece of this process. But right now, what I'm wanting to share about is that, as I mentioned, many of us have the spark of our awakening already sparked. Many don't know that this is what they're going through. And what I have found just really lovely is that people who are not familiar necessarily with this particular path, because it's not a very well-known path. The Shakti-Kundalini path is not necessarily one that speaks to everybody. It is not for everybody. And there's been a lot of caution around this tradition. There's been a lot of sort of scary stories around it. I'm not going to say that that hasn't been warranted, but I will say that we're in a very different time right now. The frequencies on our planet are supporting this right now, and the level of density that we've had to go through in the past that have made this process that much more intense is not the same. So given that, the experiences are very much the same as the ascension process. So what used to be termed Kundalini awakening symptoms are now ascension symptoms, right? We're going to be feeling them, we're experiencing them, we're having the issues in the body that are changing because both these paths, ascension or the Shakti-Kundalini, they're embodied processes, meaning that we're going to feel it in the body because our physical body is going through a spiritual evolutionary process. It happens in here as well as our consciousness, right? Because it's all consciousness. So I really have loved that what I maybe have referred to as working with Divine Mother, or working with, my own true essence, that wording is now being termed by those who are not familiar with this tradition, and most of them tend to be of a younger generation, as light language. I love that because light language, of course, is what my path evolved into, which makes total sense because it's the same path. So what exactly, I just want to give just a little bit of a peek at what I mean by surrender and what I really mean by this happens through the body. Okay? So if I were to completely let go of my need, Lotus's need, my personality's need to control anything at this point in time, and if I were to let go with my breath, then you might notice that my body begins a very subtle movement, right? So it looks like I am stretching. But the Kundalini energy, the Shakti, right, is moving through my body, and I surrender completely to it. So why is this important, right? Part of why it's important is that many people are already experiencing this and either are confused by it, afraid of it, or they're not aware that maybe if they're already experiencing this movement during meditation, they aren't aware that that is just the beginning of the unfolding of this unification process, right? This awakening, quickening process of yoga, right? It's to merge us 100%, and it's done organically. It's done precisely in the way that our soul and our highest self needs it to be, because that's who's in control. Not our mind, not a technique, not a structured teaching, not a concept. All of those things can be helpful, and all of those things can get in the way if one is really wanting to move along the awakening path more with more devotion, more deeply connected, and really coming into union with their self, capital self. Okay? And it doesn't mean that we don't lose, that we lose our personality, but what it means is that our personality and that ego construct is no longer running the show, right? Because there's an embodiment that begins to happen of our own higher wisdom, our own deeper wisdom that is connected directly to divine source. So that's one reason why it's really important. The other reason why it's really important to understand this more deeply is that some people are not allowing the energy to move as it needs because they don't know, because it's scary, many reasons. It's confusing, as I mentioned. And so they may have blockages in their system that this divine force is trying to move through. And if somebody, say for instance, just to keep this very simple, say for instance, we have a blockage somehow in our shoulder blade, right? So maybe my right shoulder blade. And so I've got this energy that's moving, and then I can start to feel it making pressure, right, on my shoulder blade that might actually be painful. And it might actually create more pain or nerve, what's the word I'm looking for? Nerve pressure between maybe the muscle and the nerve, or the bone and the nerve, any of that. And I'm resisting what's happening, right? So what's actually trying to happen is your body's life force energy is trying to heal itself. And maybe it wants your arm to go like this, right? Maybe it wants to start moving your body around. But if you don't know what's happening, it's like, whoa, okay, that's a little freaky, right? So you resist it, and it creates more problems. So that's the second reason. People are experiencing jumps in consciousness that they may not be ready for, because there has not been a clearing and purification, which is what Kundalini does through the chakra system. And this is not a linear process. It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then all of a sudden we're enlightened. It doesn't do that. It circles, right? We revisit, we revisit, we revisit, we revisit, we revisit, we revisit, okay? For years, we can revisit. And so if we aren't ready and prepared, right, with a grounding, what starts to happen to our consciousness can be a little bit premature than what has happened in our heart space. Okay? We may access abilities, we may access things that we aren't ready for because our heart center has not been purified and our grounding has not been anchored. Okay? So that's another reason. Those are kind of the main reasons that maybe there's oftentimes cautionary tales. The other thing is this is natural. Our bodies are designed for this process. Our chakra system, our subtle bodies, our nervous system, all of this is designed for this very experience of embodiment. Any meditation, any yoga, any mudras, any mantras, all of that comes through spontaneously as needed by one's soul in order to do the work that needs to happen with this path. And that being said, this is the very origin of any systematic process of yoga, of mantra, right? Of mudra, of breath work. Thousands of years ago, we can go back. This is the origin. The point of all spiritual practice is to awaken, it's to expand our consciousness, but that is part and parcel with allowing this energy to move. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do it in this way or that everybody's blueprint, maybe we can say that they are here for this type of awakening, and yet many are, because many are experiencing it. And it's needed, right? Because this is the ascension piece of this. This is the expansion of consciousness, and it is the embodied process that happens through our sacred and divine technology, through the wisdom that we are imbued with, and the remembrance of what we already know that goes beyond this time and space, this incarnation. Okay? So it's a beautiful, beautiful, powerful process. And I do this work primarily one-on-one in private. I support people who have a desire for this, who feel called to this, who are already experiencing things that they may not know, because my work is all about embodiment. And yoga of the divine feminine is open to men and women who are seeking this devotional relationship with their own essence, with God's presence within them. This is called the Shekinah in Judaism, right? We have Shakti. We have Shekinah in Judaism, the presence of God in the body. It is the divine force. We have the Holy Spirit, right? That does more than what we see in the charismatic practices or the holy rollers or the Quakers. It's all the same thing, right? However, when we give life to this divinity and create a relationship, a devotional relationship, we are the temple. And that is what yoga of the divine feminine facilitates, teaches, and guides, because it's a new language literally that we are learning when we enter into this path and having the guidance of somebody who has already walked this path for a very long time is definitely what one would recommend until we have a handle and that grounded, devotional, pure relationship that has been cultivated within our own hearts, where we can really listen, sense, feel, know our own divine guidance through the movement, through the dance, right? Through the utterances that flow spontaneously and magically through the mouth, through the hands, through the body. So this is a very, as I said, deep and quickened path of embodiment, where we come heart to heart, right, with our feminine, with our divinity, but it also sets us up and helps to create this intertwining, this balancing of our own sun and moon, our own masculine and feminine, and all the elements involved in that, to help to create the stage for the inner union and the sacred marriage, the divine marriage that takes place inside first before we're ready to manifest that out in the world. So I wanted to just give a little bit of that overview. I'm going to be doing a small gathering on October 5th here in Tulsa, and I am looking forward to, my intention is that in January I would like to start doing larger retreats, weekend retreats for really the deeper immersion into this process of yoga of the divine feminine and the deeper learnings and teachings, both informational for our intellect, but really deeply coming into our divine temples, which is the sacred technology of our physical body and our heart. All right. Thank you so much. And if you have any inquiries, you can find me on Facebook, Lotus Lindley. You can also connect with me on Facebook at Lotus Lindley Art of Sacred Embodiment. And you can go to my website, which is still in transition. It's getting ready to move through, as I mentioned before, lotuslindley.net. And there's email contact there that you can reach out to me. All right. Thank you so much. Blessings.